Mainstream mental health is flawed, and I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm Andrea Clark, a former family therapist who walked away from the system to expose the truth. After my own journey from medication maze to holistic healing, I'm here to challenge the status quo and reveal the mental health truths most people don't know. The truth about mental health is your radical roadmap to wellness. Raw stories, expert insights, breakthrough solutions. This is where traditional modalities end and real healing begins. I am really excited for you to dive into this episode today. I am interviewing somebody who has extensive experience in working with the military and propaganda. Jonathan Davis is a former U.S. Army Special Operations Civil Affairs soldier. He's taught English as a second language in Eastern Europe. He has his own journey with propaganda and critical thinking, and he's currently the author of a book series, Question Things. Let's get into the episode. All right, Jonathan, I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today.
Not nearly as excited as I am. Thank you very much, Andrea.
I'm really excited to talk about what you do, teaching people critical thinking, how to identify propaganda, why you're so passionate about this. And I'm hoping that people listening in can walk away from this with some new skills, right? That they get from you about how to think more critically, how to really identify this messaging. I'm really excited. Let's dive into this whole critical thinking thing.
Yeah, people listening, if they're paying attention, they'll walk away from this dangerous.
All right, like it.
I started to ask myself, why is it that I believe what I believe? Mm-hmm. And why is it I think the way I do? Why do other people think the way they do? Usually, this is the part of the conversation where people give their credentials. That's an excellent thing to do. Hopefully, by the end of this conversation, people listening will completely ignore your credentials. I graduated from the John F. Kennedy School of Special Operations and Unconventional Warfare.
Okay.
And I worked with psychological operations. That used to be the propaganda department. It is embarrassingly easy to manipulate people.
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about today, it's not for our neighbors. We're not talking about your neighbors. When you hear good advice, we're not talking about your coworkers or your friends or your family. We're talking about you. There was a country, I forget the country, but they had trouble with people signing up to be organ donors. The form at the Department of Motor Vehicles said something like, do you want to donate your organs? Check yes or no in the box. They had something like 10% people check yes. Just by changing it to, would you not like your organs go to waste and prefer to donate them? Something like 90% of the people started to check yes in the box. And they had no idea that there was any change. It's just the way things work. You don't know what you're being sold on. And this isn't just like what kind of ice cream you want. It's like, what are you going to do with your body, right? We go from a no to a yes, just so simply. I could talk to you about examples of propaganda, and that would be kind of fun. But in my experience, it matters about zero. For example, I've got appealing to fear. That's actually a good one. Appeal to prejudice, inevitable victory, join the crowd, full using beautiful people in your advertisements, so on and so on and so on.
I have to tell you, this is fascinating for me, not only from my background in psychology, but I'm a digital marketer. I've taken so many courses around how to sell and different angles to sell from and people's buying triggers and pain points. And this is all embedded in that, right? With propaganda and appealing to these things.
You're at the tip of the spear. Yeah. So you probably know more about this than I do.
No, I don't think I know more, but I definitely know that there's a way to appeal to people's fear, appeal to their desires. Like, people have core desires, right? And if you identify what they are and you market that way, you can sell.
Governments love fear. They absolutely love it, because then you're just putty in their hands. So never let a good disaster go to waste. That's their motto. But just feelings in general, I think it was Robert Greene's book when he writes a chapter about how to start a cult. In the absence of facts, just appeal to people's feelings. Because once you feel things, I mean, it's over. You're going to swallow it all, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, one of the things they say in marketing is people buy from emotion. And buying is the same thing as believing certain propaganda. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. That's what this is all about right there. So there's the key. So instead of going into 21 different examples of propaganda, in my experience teaching, everyone listening to this will walk away with no change whatsoever. So really what we're going to talk about is a mindset. The last book I wrote, Question Things. Voltaire said it best. The subtitle is Certainty is an Absurdity. Its aim is to promote the mindset of a learner. Even when I'm teaching, I'm learning. Nowadays, especially, facts are indiscernible from fiction. So we all like to watch the news and think that we're smart enough to not be manipulated. Mm-hmm. You are not. Mm-hmm. I am not. You have no idea what the facts are. There's a lot of talk these days about fact checking. Yeah, well, the fact checkers are pushing an agenda too, usually. We all know Wikipedia has been compromised. They push agendas all the time. I think there's going to come a time when there are more or less official fact checking websites, and probably Big Pharma will buy one of them and start putting their agenda into it without really letting people know. Fact checking is, I can't do it without getting into politics, so I'm not going to do it. But just trust me, if you're listening to this, you're not immune to manipulation through supposed facts.
When you say without getting into politics, do you mean specifically right or left wing, or do you just mean about the government?
Because the thing is like in America, we've made everything left or right.
When it's not, but
it's not. I mean, it's
yeah.
Like, how did COVID become political? It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I'm always trying to figure out who can we blame. Don't get me started when really there's bigger things to blame. But I think that my podcast is not a political podcast, but in a way it is, because I take a stance on mental health and the mental health system, right? And that could be considered political.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I wish I wasn't vaccinated, but I am. I've probably had more vaccines than you can count on all your hands and toes. And there was a time, and just so you know how bad it's gotten now, Big Pharma writes the pharmacology textbooks for a lot of these universities. And in fact, they fund some of the universities.
Well, they also are a part of the peer-reviewed process. Like, that's a problem. People don't understand that. Like, that people need to be looking at these peer-reviewed journals from a lens of who funded this? Is there anything that's been left out?
That's sort of what I'm getting into. So there was something about the possibility of mercury being in these vaccines. Someone had said, well, the mercury is not bad mercury. So somebody fact checked this, and I'm talking about like a news, like media, like mainstream news, fact check this. And they go, we didn't detect mercury in the system after 2 weeks. Somebody fact checked. The study lasted 2 weeks. And it turns out you can't just cut humans' brains open and find out if there's mercury in there. But people actually did this with monkeys in some other country, and I think they found mercury in their brain 10 years after they had received vaccinations. Fact checks mean about nothing to me now, and credentials mean nothing too. I mean, there was a time when I have this magazine, I think it's People magazine. It says right on the cover something like 4 to 5 doctors recommend Camel over any other brand. Smoking was recommended by doctors to help you relax, and you'll see it all the time on news. People like to quote generals. Some generals are good. Some are just idiots. We don't get to suspend our criteria for critical thinking based on who's talking. It remains the same, regardless of who's talking, including me. So medicine, yeah, I got on a prescription for, it was probably Ritalin at the time, or Adderall, when I was 8 years old. My mom was kind of a hippie. She wasn't really into that sort of thing. But the guy in the lab coat told her, your son is very special. He's got a special condition, ADD, and this is this new treatment we have for it. Research shows that cognitive behavior therapy is helpful. Helps 50%. I'm just making up numbers. And behavior therapy plus medication helps 70 or 80% of the people. She's like, 80% sounds good. We'll take it. But if you go to the pharmacy with a prescription for Adderall and you say, I would like the generic, they will hand you a bottle that says amphetamine. It's giving 8-year-olds methamphetamine probably isn't a good idea, even if it makes them shut up.
My brother was
the symptoms
at a really young age, and I watched how that affected him, and he still suffers today with issues that are unresolved from being medicated for so long, for so young.
I too. I was on it for 20 years.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. This is like something I'm really passionate about is like parents do not understand because doctors are just like, yeah, it's totally great. It's totally fine. It's painful.
Especially through the developmental years.
Yes, it's hard.
How it works is it's highly dopaminergic, right? So it's working on the dopamine system, which is our system for seeking. So a lot of people think that dopamine is really just what you get when you eat a piece of candy, but it seems more so now that it's connected to motivation, causes us to seek things, to look for things, to figure things out. It motivates us. Avoids fatigue too. It sort of gets around fatigue somehow. Give someone this exogenous dopamine for 20 years throughout their developmental years and then stop giving it to them and see what happens. I mean, it is a very empty, dark place that you don't recover from.
Don't. And even when it wears off. I don't know how you experienced that, but I watched my brother. He really struggled when he wasn't on it to be motivated. He would overeat. Food and dopamine have a relationship. He could only be on things it was like he was looking for that thing to stimulate him after he weaned off for the day. It was really sad because he just lived this weird cycle of being kind of sedated and able to focus and then completely dysregulated, seeking things to feel balanced again. I mean, I watched him do that from really little and into his teen years and young adult years.
It's tragic. I'm not up to speed on Adderall studies, but the real ones are suppressed. I mean, it's disgusting to me that we're still giving this stuff to kids. I mean, we should know better. It also causes problems with soft tissue, joints, ligaments. Tendinitis is a very serious issue and common issue for people who've been on these stimulants for decades. Tooth decay, mineralization, deterializes of the bones. Just look at a crack addict, and it's like an accelerated version of being on Adderall for a very long time.
There's these long-term repercussions that you don't see until way down the road. And often people don't even know that's what it's from.
Exactly, yeah.
Bond Charge brings you cutting-edge wellness tools like red light therapy, EMF shields, cold therapy, and light therapy glasses, all designed to support your body's natural healing process. Red light therapy is clinically shown to boost mitochondrial function and reduce inflammation. EMF shields help to protect against the effects of everyday radiation exposure from our devices. Blue light blocking glasses are shown to improve sleep and reduce eye strain. I am obsessed with so many of their products. My home is stacked with EMF protectors. I use their red light tools weekly, and I love their light sensitivity glasses. I'm seeing a huge reduction in my migraines. Bond Charge is HSA and FSA eligible, so investing in your health has never been easier. Visit bondcharge.com and use code MHM for 15% off. You can also check the show notes for links and codes. Tell us a little bit about this whole critical thinking thing.
Yeah, well, this comes in. So it reminds me of Milgram's obedience to authority study. For people who are unfamiliar, a university had people in lab coats bring in these test subjects. They would say, you're going to administer a test. There's this guy sitting in a chair and he gets an answer wrong. You shock him. He gets it right. You don't shock him. Their little shock board in front of the test subject, it was like from 1 to 10, 1 being like a little shock and 10 being like certain death. And the number of people who participated in the study who were willing to shock the participant up to possible death was pretty alarming. The question isn't how did so many people become Nazis, but how is it that I could become a Nazi?
Yeah.
There was a professor who used to ask his students the first day of class, if you were born in whatever year, right, during slavery, how many of you would be an abolitionist? And of course, everyone in the class raises their hand. But the statistical fact is that not everybody would be against slavery. We're products of our environment. That goes into a lot of really disgusting areas of of life. So this stuff is for us. How do I avoid being a victim of propaganda? Be less certain. How do I form beliefs? Well, don't form beliefs, right? That's not what having an open mind is. So even when I go into a debate, I don't go into a debate trying to explain what I believe. I really go into it with the mindset of teach me. I go into it thinking, I'm willing to believe you, just convince me. But we do it kind of backwards. We tend to, and there may be a good reason for this, as far as evolutionary biology goes. Maybe we put up our defenses because we don't want to be manipulated. And so we're very reluctant to be receptive. So it also makes it difficult to listen to people. They usually say we'll all have yeah, but guy in our head.
It's a skill to listen. It's time to cultivate.
I'll literally practice in the mirror. I'll say something that's distasteful to me, and I'll just kind of let it sink in, feel the discomfort, let the discomfort pass, and say, tell me more. Because it takes a lot. It takes practice. This is something everybody really needs time. So I call him yeah, but guy. Anytime you hear an otherwise decent point that's being made, we all have yeah, but guy in our brains chiming in, thinking of a very narrow context in which this good advice you're hearing might not be true. So someone could say to you, yeah, you should probably do decent business with people and be relatively nice and not screw people over, because what goes around comes around. And yeah, but guy's going to go, yeah, but I know a guy in Alaska with 4 chickens. He was an asshole his whole life and nothing bad ever happened to him. And what happens is we stop thinking halfway through when somebody's talking because yeah, but guy chimes in and we completely missed an otherwise decent point. I mean, Can we just all agree that we're adults and we no longer need this disclaimer before everything that's okay, so I realize what I'm going to say isn't true for everyone, everywhere, at all times, and in every context. But what goes around comes around. Decent advice.
There's a lot of people in the world, though, that are very black and white and very literal in their thinking. Again, it's a skill, right? To understand that the world is gray. Life is gray. There's exception.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's so hard that, it's nearly impossible for some of us. Let's talk about what we're really dealing with here. We're not dealing with the mind. We're dealing with hormones, geography sometimes, like your physical proximity to bad ideas. And so what a person needs in order to change their mind, it might not have anything to do with the mind. It might have to do with, they need to leave the state. They're getting their ideas from their family, from their coworkers. And then in regard to hormones, ideas are not just ideas. They're some people's identity. Your tribe or your group is your family as far as your hormones are concerned. Hormone oxytocin, which is often connected to family and the feeling of familiar. Some people call it the love hormone, but it's not exactly that. It's what connects you to things. When you hear somebody saying something that is different from what your tribe or your family is, that's like an attack on your family. It hurts. So that's number one. There's a whole lot of number ones. There's a whole lot of first of all. So I might say that about 10 times, but what we're dealing with is not really the mind so much. We're dealing with hormones. We're dealing with its trouble. So don't identify with beliefs. Don't even have beliefs.
Okay, so how do you not have beliefs, though?
So here's where yeah, but guy usually says to me, yeah, but I think that child sacrifice is wrong. I think so too. I believe that I'm willing to go on record saying I believe child sacrifice is probably bad. It's most definitely bad. It's always bad. Don't sacrifice your children. How do you not have beliefs? There are some fundamental things that we can have beliefs on. And it's really just that sometimes we do have to yeah, but second. Some people might say it like this. First, steel man an argument and then straw man an argument. So steel manning is where you try to make someone's point for them in your head. So you'll steel man their argument. So what you're saying is that makes sense because. And then after you do that, it's perfectly fine to straw man their argument. Nobody wants you to question things more than me. Just do it second if you can. And even that isn't good advice for everyone, everywhere at all times, because some people are really gullible and they just believe everything they hear. Right. Generally speaking, you want to try to be as generous to the person speaking as possible. Be patient. Consider a world that exists in which what the speaker is saying could be true. Try and think of someone, if it's not you, try and think of someone for whom it is good advice. Mm-hmm. And after you've done that, then let's poke holes in what we just heard. And so the irony is, I've had some people say to me, I've read your book, and one person say, why would you be so concerned with what people think anyways? And you shouldn't. But even if you are concerned with what people think, it still doesn't make sense to try and seem smart. A lot of times that's the motivation behind a lot of the things we do. We want to seem like a smarty pants.
Well, we don't want to be wrong.
We don't want to be wrong, right? There's the secret. Don't be attached to ideas, and you'll never be wrong. Be a learner.
Yeah, be curious. Okay, so here's my question. Let's say there's a person who doesn't care what people think. I wouldn't say I 100% don't, but I'm fairly impervious to people's opinions. However, there are things in the world that I hear and see. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't get sucked into this. I am influenced, right? I am influenceable. Even if somebody doesn't care what people think, we still are influenced, right? We can still be influenced by certain things that we care about or...
And you will be. You will be, yeah. You can't possibly defend yourself from all forms of marketing and all forms of propaganda at all times, because the level it's gotten to is impossible to navigate. Especially as like AI gets better and stuff, facts will be indiscernible from fiction and vice versa. That's why the mindset is what I've chosen to focus on most recently. Trying to have a healthy level of skepticism. Yes, there are things we can be certain about, but a great practice with this and many things in life starts with the vocabulary. I see on YouTube Short, it seems like they're pushing vocabulary a lot. Like, stop talking negative about yourself all the time and maybe wake up and say, today's going to be a great day. You can do this too with keeping an open mind. Changing the vocabulary is really helpful in keeping an open mind. And that's a good defense from this wave of manipulation, propaganda, marketing that comes our way.
Can you share a little bit more, maybe some broader examples on how you might question something, like take it from a place of curiosity versus right or wrong, you know?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I don't believe in God. I don't neither believe nor not believe. My position there is like, I might believe you, just convince me. But I had a roommate some years ago who was Muslim. I grew up in a Christian house. From age 0 to 28, I was going to church twice a week.
Okay.
I drank the Kool-Aid hard by the gallons. And even though at the time when we were roommates, I didn't believe anymore, when he said some things about Jesus, it still hurt me. It's a little part of me was like, ouch, that's my imaginary friend you're talking about. I didn't have any comments for him, really. I mean, I agreed with what he was saying. That's what's more bizarre. But the example that came to mind, you might be right on there with Jesus. Convince me and I'll jump on board too. This is the
thing. I don't feel like I need to convince you. I am curious, though. I'm not necessarily curious about what he said, but I'm more curious, like, you agreed, but you still felt that emotion. What do you think that that's about? Was that the attachment to the belief? Was it...
Yeah.
Because this is part of why people believe propaganda, right? Is because what you just said is that you had this, like, kind of hurt you, even though you don't even necessarily believe that anymore. That just shows how deeply ingrained things can become sometimes.
Yeah. I invested nearly 3 out of 4 decades to attaching my feelings and my heart to my father, Jesus, to my friend, Jesus, to my mentor, Jesus. Even though several years after I stopped believing that, it still hurt. I think you get the idea. A recent example also that came to mind, Putin. Putin is a propaganda machine. I mean, this guy is on his propaganda game. So I went to Ukraine. I was living in Ukraine, but I wasn't there when the war started. I was at work and a friend of mine had said, missiles are going into Kyiv. I stopped what I was doing. I got up and I walked towards the door. I got in my car and I drove to JFK and got on the first plane to Kyiv. I wasn't there until the 25th, I think, because they stopped flights into Kyiv. I had to fly into Poland and then drive. When I got back to America, it turns out that this whole issue was political. I was dumbfounded. What you don't want to do is identify with saying things like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a Libertarian, or anything like that. So my desire is usually not to be political, not to identify with my politics.
Right.
But it turns out that my friends who were kind of on the right were like, screw Ukraine. They're getting what they deserve because they sided with the West on things. And there was a coup in Kyiv that was started by the CIA, and NATO's been expanding into Poland. Putin said not to. All this propaganda is coming down the pipe. And as true as it is, and here's the other scary thing, is that propaganda is often not lies. Propaganda is true statements designed to distract us from the big picture. I mean, I went there because I have friends there. My friends have children, and the thought of children having bombs fall on their head was disturbing, and I couldn't just watch. But anyways, when you hear Putin talk, they'll say things like, how do you respond to assassinating your political opponents? And he'll say, well, what about U.S. drone strikes in Syria? Is that okay? We go, well, no, that's not okay. It's a good point. But no, it's not a good point at all. You've just distracted me from the point, which is you're killing your political opponents, jailing them for life or assassinating them. Propaganda is often true statements designed to distract us from the big picture. And it works almost every time.
Can you give an example of that when it comes to mental health, medication, big pharma, conventional medicine?
I've got a great one for you.
Okay.
During this whole COVID thing, what didn't pass the smell test for me was I didn't see one PSA, public service announcement, or one billboard, and believe me, there were lots of them in Delaware. I didn't see one public service announcement about washing your hands.
But it was in the signs everywhere.
A whole lot about getting the jab. And if you're not getting the jab, you're a murderer. You're killing people around you. The difference is people don't really make money on you washing your hands. And we have to create fear. We have to create anger. We have to create very strong feelings. We have to create teams. And this is what propaganda often does, is create teams. So it's really important to say, there are sides. Which one are you on? And that was the mask. You have to wear a mask. Not one word about washing your hands. How can you check if I washed my hands? You can't do it.
That's interesting. That's really true, though. Like when it comes to propaganda and when it comes to creating a movement, you have to have something to be against, and there has to be groups. It's like, well, which group are you going to choose, or which belief system are you going to choose, or very black and white. I'll speak very vulnerably, and whoever on my podcast listens, and if they're offended, they're offended. But I identified primarily as a Democrat for a long time. I vote on issues. I don't vote for a person. My beliefs are more democratic. But this campaign, it's not about the people. I think both of them are. I have lots of opinions about the actual people who are running for office, but I am really passionate about this movement, this Make America Healthy Again movement. But I'm not passionate about a bunch of the other stuff that's happening. It really got me thinking, because it's either you're here or you're here. But no, I'm not. I identify with multiple things on both sides. And I'm like, why aren't we allowed to be like that? I was frustrated and just questioning that a lot. Why aren't we allowed to identify with both sides, right?
Truth is usually in the middle, right?
Well, it's almost like there's no place for people like that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I don't feel that way, but it makes you feel like you either have to pick to survive or to fit in, or
Right.
And I'm just like, fuck that. This is such a problem in our world. I'm still seeing all sorts of stuff being posted, and it's painful to watch. You can have a multifaceted belief system. You can believe in multiple things. You can see the good in here and the good in here and the bad in here and the bad. You know what I mean? Like, life is full of gray. It's alienating. You feel very left out. And this is what I feel like bigger powers and propaganda prey on, is like this idea that people don't want to feel isolated. It is challenging to stand up and be like a lone wolf, right? And that's what it feels like.
That's what they want. You know, we really ought to make it trendy to be independent. Like, when is that going to trend, you know?
You know, what's interesting is people have different beliefs, and that's fine, but they say they're independent. They say they're free thinkers, but I'm like, you're so far on one side or the other when it comes to religion or politics or health. Or have you questioned if you really are an independent thinker or not? You know what I mean?
Here's what's so bizarre is that now that we have YouTube, there are fewer secrets now. You can play videos of agendas that our whopping 2 parties in America have completely flipped on, completely reversed key fundamental moral issues.
Yeah.
Yet the same people I know are still Republicans and the same people I know are still Democrats and have been for the last 30 years, regardless of the complete flip. So it's not morals that caused these people to choose sides. It's just tribalism.
It is.
And adjectives. Beware of adjectives, because news nowadays, there's more adjectives than news.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, this person's racist remarks has everyone talking. Okay, tell me the remarks. I'll decide if they're racist.
Yeah.
And a lot of us just go, woo, racist remarks. What a jerk. Who could tweet racist things? It just goes on and on. So I made a little video once and I just made up a country name. So, hi, I'm reporting live from Shurmakistan, and the situation is horrible. The new dictator here, 11,000 people have already died from his racist policies. Well, a lot of us would just see that and go, wow, that country has a dictator. His policies are clearly killing people. But how many people died last year? Was it 12,000? Because if so, it's like 1,000 people fewer than he's killed this year. So the situation's pretty good.
Well, so this goes back to what you were saying about how propaganda uses true statements, but it's distracting you from the bigger picture.
Right.
And that's something I've been really working on over the last couple of years is, okay, I hear that, but let's zoom out a little bit and ask some more questions. And what's the bigger picture? What's the surrounding context? What's the history? Who's saying this? Where is this coming from? And if there's empirical data behind it, but who funded that and what was omitted?
The
And
money.
it's like so many questions, right? Just really getting curious about all of it and being okay to say, you know what? I don't know. I mean, there's things my daughter, she's getting older, she's 11, and she asks me a lot of things. And if I don't know, meaning I don't even know where I stand, I'll say, I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know. And it's okay that you decide for yourself. And like, you just have to ask questions, right? You just have to be curious. And that probably is newer for me in the last maybe 5 years, where I'm okay to say, I don't know. Even though I have this belief, I don't know if I actually believe this part, that most people who have this belief believe this.
Yeah. And not only that, we celebrate people who do that. It isn't talked about so much, but I've noticed people who were once on top of their game and now they've just sort of fallen into the fringes of obscurity. That's the weirdo who performed badly in debate. We all remember the one or two things that this guy said in a debate that was like, he was clearly wrong. Like, why did he double down and just make himself look like an idiot? And that's all I remember. And when people go, well, I haven't heard about that. Tell me about that. There's something in our brains that go, wow, this is a pretty good dude. I'm going to trust this person. And it's so ironic because the reason that we do it the wrong way is because we want people to think we're smart, but it always makes us look stupid.
It does. It's so bad.
So it's like what somebody said to me, like, even if your main concern is what other people think, which it shouldn't be, don't do it, because the irony is, like, you still look like an idiot by trying to be smart.
So I'd really like to zone in on mental health and medication and like that industry. This is a huge mission of my podcast, is to give people alternative things that they can go investigate for themselves for their healing. I'm wondering if you have any wisdom or thoughts. So let me go back. Like you described your mom, somebody in a lab coat, they had this authority. It was the same when I was sat in front of a psychiatrist when I was like 14 or 15. My mom just listened. And I get it. Doctors have all this authority, right? I remember I was in my early 20s, mid-20s. I had taken myself off medication when I was 19. I was like, I'm not getting put on anything like that again. I started my natural healing journey. And I remember I was really not feeling myself. And now I know that I most likely had my first Epstein-Barr flare back then. But at the time, I had no idea, right? So I was tired. I didn't have as much motivation. And I was in college. And I went to go see a doctor. It's like he asked me what was going on. And then in 3 minutes, he says to me, are you ready to go on an antidepressant? And I was mortified. Like, first of all, you haven't asked me any questions other than what's going on. You haven't run any tests. And at that point, I had already had this experience. So I knew not to fully trust a doctor, but I didn't have the skills to articulate all of the knowledge yet to really articulate or advocate for myself to that doctor, right? So I got up and I left. I was so upset. I remember sitting in my car crying because I felt so unheard. I'm like, why are we automatically assuming that I'm depressed when I'm a high functioning straight A student who's likes her life, but she's not feeling like I don't feel well. And he didn't even ask any further questions to figure out like maybe I'm sick or maybe I don't know. And I think so many people have these experiences every single day where they go sit in front of somebody who's supposed to help them and they feel completely unheard, especially women, because we have hormones and all sorts of stuff, but we feel unheard and it almost feels like the only option is to listen or suffer. There's no in between. And I'm just wondering if you can share any words of wisdom around that for people who have had similar experiences and they're on this journey to trying to figure it out. And
Yeah, question things. It seems that doctors are treating, because they've been trained to do this, to treat symptoms. What their textbook teaches them is give them blood work. If you see this number, prescribe them this. You have high blood pressure, prescribe them Lipitor, and that number will go down. But no one's asking, how is it that the blood pressure got high?
right, how did we get here in the first place?
What can I do to get that number to go down? Well, you can take Lipitor. I had a doctor once tell me that he would put it in the water if he had his way.
Oh, wow.
He's like, it's just the greatest drug ever, and there's no side effects. There's nothing bad. The thing is that even doctors who have like a general practice, they're not really required to learn much about nutrition. So,
Oh, they're not. They literally get, I have a girlfriend who's a psychiatrist and she said, Andrea, we get not even 2 full months of nutrition and it's like the super old school food pyramid.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like this new movement in psychiatry is treating people with food because it turns out like so many psychological problems are caused by the food that we're eating.
Food and our microbiome. There's a psychiatrist I really want to have her on. She's a child psychiatrist and she's working with one of my friend's kiddos and she's not doing med. She is working on his gut brain axis and his microbiome. And it's like amazing, you know, because of what all the new research is starting to point to, which is a lot of our neurotransmitters are actually primarily made and modulated in our microbiome and then speak to our brain. This is a huge missing piece for a lot of people is microbiome health. And food has a lot to do with that, right? If we've got additives, dyes, highly processed food, it's trashing our microbiomes.
Yeah, microbiome is huge. That's the coaxial communication between your gut microbiome and your brain. As it turns out, it's a two-way street. It's coaxial. So your gut microbiome is like telling your brain what time of day it is. And that it isn't so much that your brain is just controlling your body. We're actually sort of like slaves to our parasites in a lot of ways. We have parasites all over us, like all in our skin, inside of our bodies, everywhere. I think there's a chapter on this in the book, is like, you really just can't be certain about what even causes your beliefs or your tastes in food or your likes and dislikes or your mood or your character as a human, because so many things are dictated by other factors and you can't possibly add them all together and know what the main cause is or if there even is a main cause. But it's bizarre that the connection that food has to our mood and our character as humans, especially as we develop, is insanely strong. Doctors just they haven't been trained to think in terms of functional medicine. For example, you hear people with ADD have 80% improvements if they have medication plus CBT. Mm-hmm. What's an improvement? Improve on what? What's ADD? What's better? What was the research? Is this an 80% improvement in reading? An 80% improvement in sitting down and shutting up? You know, what's the measure for good? What's the measure for bad? You ever consider that like some people, especially kids, might be supposed to run around and act like kids? I have no doubt that it's helpful if they shut up. I mean, I can't stand going to a restaurant and hearing some kid just go, but they're kids and we're humans. We get depressed. And wouldn't it be better to say if something is causing your depression, sometimes sometimes it's circumstantial. Sometimes it's not. Like
a lot of times it's circumstantial from just
exactly. Yeah. But the question's probably not even being asked. I heard from a guy, he was a monk from someplace. I think it's the same guy who said one of my favorite quotes, which is, life is simple. Humans make it difficult. They were treating this guy in his village for depression and they tried everything. Turns out he just needed a cow. They tried medication, they tried therapy, and it turns out his finances weren't so good, and he didn't have, like, his farm went bad, and so we all pitched in and got him a cow, and that started this ball rolling of getting his life back together, and it's like, now he's perfectly fine.
This is the thing that I think is really hard, is that a lot of people aren't educated, and you don't even need a formal education, just a little bit of knowledge to feel empowered to say, you know what, that doesn't sound right for me. That doesn't feel right for me. Like when I was sitting in front of that doctor, I didn't have all the words, but I knew instinctually from my past experience that no, that doesn't feel right for me. And I think there's so many people that are scared to trust themselves, or they don't have the words, and they don't want to be wrong. Who wants to be wrong to a doctor? Because doctors can be very good at making you wrong if you question too much. And I've had a lot of those experiences because I question a lot. I ask a lot of questions, and I have for the majority of my life. People of authority really don't like that. They work hard to make you feel wrong as quickly as possible so that you just comply. And
I've got 15 minutes with you until I get to the next patient. Yeah, let's speed this up.
yeah, and I feel deeply for people who don't feel comfortable enough, right, to advocate for themselves. I had a lot of women in my practice who would come see me. We'd be working a lot of postpartum, and they'd go see their practitioner, and their practitioner would write them a script, but they would never fill it. But they didn't say anything, right? They didn't say, like, that's not how I want to do this. Is there other ways? Because they didn't feel like they could. I can't stand up to my doctor, or I can't push back with my doctor. And so then they would go home and not fill it, which is fine, but then they wouldn't have anything else, right? They'd have therapy, but they didn't have another avenue that they felt like they could take. So they just felt helpless and hopeless.
Some people need to understand that you should probably feel depressed sometimes.
It's okay to feeling sad.
You don't have a rare medical issue. The price of admission into life is depression, embarrassment, anxiety, fear. It's going to happen, especially postpartum. I mean, what's the rate of depression there? Like 100%? I don't know.
Or anxiety. Yeah. I mean, it's such a tumultuous time in a woman's life. We could have a whole episode on that. But you know, what's interesting, what you just said is I was married before, and I had a very traumatic divorce, very unexpected, very traumatic. I felt like my life was being ripped apart. I became a single mom overnight. Well, I'm okay now, but at the time, I was so sad, and I was grieving, and I was really wrestling with like my new normal, right? And knowing that I needed to accept it to move forward. I had a girlfriend who really struggled with watching me grieve, watching me go through this process. And she wanted me to go on medication. And I'm like, listen, lady, it's only been a month. This is normal. And she kept pushing, and I know why. Like, I'm not mad at her. It was her own stuff. Like, she felt very uncomfortable with, and we were best friends. And so I think she felt responsible for me, whatever. So I called my psychiatrist, and I just said, look, here's the thoughts I'm having. They're pretty dark. Like, here's what I'm feeling. It's about a month out. My friend wants me to get on medication. Like, be honest with me. Like, do I need to go see a I don't think I do. Do I need to go see a psychiatrist? Like, what, And she's like, Andrea, every human experiences dark thoughts in their lifetime. You're going to have circumstantial depression in your life, and you just went through something incredibly hard that you're still going through. She's like, no, I don't think you need to go on meds. Now call me in a year. If nothing has changed or shifted, okay, maybe that would be like a thing to consider. But no, I absolutely don't think you need to go on medication. It was a really important moment in my life because it encouraged me that I need to trust my own instincts. I need to trust my own questioning process. I wish more people knew that, because a lot of people walk through this world being made wrong all the time by people in their lives. And this goes back to your tribe. And they end up saying yes or identifying with beliefs that really end up really being harmful to them. They take different paths that can end up being really harmful to them. It's a huge bummer.
Sometimes you just got to change the people you spend time with, change your geography.
Well, and learn to listen to your own inner voice. Like, we have one for a reason. And that's where the questioning comes in.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just sort of a documentary of my evolution. That's why I know how stubborn people can be. for some people, be like standing up for themselves.
I get it. It's hard because you can be very easily alienated. It makes a lot of sense why we can be persuaded the way that we can be persuaded. I mean, I have to fight persuading myself against old scripts that I've played for myself in my life that I know don't serve me and that I know are not fully true. And I have to I have to question myself sometimes where I'm like, Andrea, is that really true?
All the time.
You know,
That's the game, is protecting us from ourselves.
where do you go to find different bits of information about, like, you're very versed, right? And so for somebody who's brand new to this process of like, I'm going to get curious, I'm going to ask more questions, I'm going to do some research, right? And then research on the research. For somebody who's just new to this, like, what would be a place to start?
You start with the mindset. You're going to find garbage everywhere, especially college. Yeah, if you want the slowest, most expensive way to learn something and the most biased way, go to college. But you can learn it take about 2 weeks to learn what I learned in college in like 5 years. But we live in an information age now where it's just free. Colleges don't have the monopoly on information anymore. I'm embarrassed it took me so long to figure that out. But you've got to start with the mindset, because I've never found one good source for information. And you bring up a good point, because a lot of my friends are always suggesting alternative news sources to me, which is extremely popular now. There's so much alt news that'll make your head spin, to help us get away from the garbage of like CNN, Fox News, NBC, and all those those are just garbage. Those are just commercials, really. And if you want to get away with that, you're not going to be saved by alternative news, because a lot of those people make their clicks and their money on being contrarians. They just basically say the opposite of what mainstream is. And the problem is sometimes things are what they seem. Listen. So start with yourself, start with your critical thinking practice, your keeping an open mind practice. Go and be free, fellow listeners.
I love it. Before we say goodbye, do you have any parting thoughts for somebody just starting this journey?
I have plenty of words for you. Well, most of what I would consider wisdom, I'm just quoting somebody else. In fact, I heard somebody say that wisdom is taking your own advice. Certainty is an absurdity, and life is change. Get used to the change.
Well, I'm so grateful for you and this conversation that we had.
Me too. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. And all of your links and your book will be linked in the show notes. So anybody who wants to pick up Jonathan's book, you guys should go click the link in the show notes. I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you for bringing just these insights today.
I am grateful to you. I'm going to add you into my daily gratitude practice tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate you. All right, you guys, we will see you in the next episode. I am eternally grateful you tuned into The Truth About Mental Health. If this message matters to you, please spread the word by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with someone who needs this knowledge. Let's keep reclaiming our mental health together.